So it's been about a week since the federal election, and I think no matter what side of the election you were on, I think everybody's now taking a moment to think about what does this mean? And us here at ACSA are starting to think about what does this mean specifically for education, both at the federal level and for California. One of the things that was frustrating about this federal election is that there wasn't a lot of discussion by either campaign about education. But one of the things that the Trump campaign did touch on was an investment of $20 billion in school choice and charter schools. That's a pretty aggressive figure. That's something that would be, frankly, difficult to do for a couple of reasons. $20 billion is more than we get right now in Title I funding. So it's not probable that the conservative Republicans in Congress would go for an investment at that level. So frankly, it's not something that we fully expect. One of the things we always hear, usually during presidential campaign, is this reaction against federal government and the big bureaucracy. And not surprisingly, in this campaign and since the election of Donald Trump, there's been some discussion of whether can the Department of Ed actually be terminated. That also is probably not likely. The reality now is that the Every Student Succeeds Act, the federal legislation that was just reauthorized by Congress and signed by the president this last year, already puts a lot of the authority back to the states. So even if there is rhetoric on limiting the power of the federal government, we've already seen this in the latest federal authorization. So the practical impact would probably be limited on California. So since the election, we've also seen some concern from folks here in California and around the country of what the election of Donald Trump is going to mean for the implementation of the Common Core standards. There's been some discussion at the federal level of whether they could eliminate the initiative altogether. Quite frankly, that's probably not probable. What the federal government has done is it's incentivized Common Core standards and curriculum, but the real power resides with the states, who have already made the investment, who have already made the policy determinations to move forward with Common Core. It's already in our schools. It's not something that California is very likely to go back on. One of the biggest areas of concern is what's going to be the status of the DACA program, or the program known as the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. This was a program that was instituted by executive order by President Obama, and the program intended to protect families and children that were brought here by their undocumented parents at a young age. Since it was an executive order that put this into place, President-elect Trump will have the ability to essentially remove that by executive order. There's a lot of questions of what that would mean for a lot of our students here in California. Luckily, what we've seen here in the early days since the election is that not only state leaders, but education leaders, district leaders around the state have essentially stated that they're going to protect the rights and the privacy of these students by not handing over documentation and by not making it easier for the federal government to deport these students. This is something that ACSA feels very strongly about, and we would support our state leaders and our local education leaders to do everything that we can for our students to feel safe while they're going to school.